So in terms of the format today, obviously you can ask questions throughout the workshop. We just ask that you use the Zoom raise your hand feature. That way we can make sure that we get to you, or if you're more comfortable with putting those questions into the chat itself, Deb will be monitoring the chat and we'll make sure that we get to all your questions. A little bit of background information for those that might not be as familiar with the MS4 permit. So this workshop that we're putting on is to go over the Lake Phosphorus Control Plan, also known as the LPCP. We're going to refer to it as the LPCP because it's a mouthful and you're going to hear it over and over again. So it's going to save time and your ears. As you all likely know, but in case you don't, only those communities that have phosphorus impairments have to create an LPCP, a Lake Phosphorus Control Plan. And those communities, I know you're here, but just in case you need a little reminder, the communities with phosphorus impairments are Amherst, Bedford, Derry, Hollis, Hudson, Kingston, Manchester, Merrimack, Newton, Raymond, and Sandown. So just a reminder, in case you wandered here and you're not representing, or you're not from one of those communities, you're free if you don't want to attend, but I think you're all here for the same reason. And then, so you all know this LPCP was due in year 5 for MS4 permittees, but after a lot of discussion with the NH Stormwater Coalition chairs, along with NHDES and UNH, we decided that we needed some additional time to really add that final push to the template to give all of you MS4 permittees the best template that we could. And we're very glad that we did because we've definitely brought it to that next level. We did create language in the New Hampshire Year 5 annual report template that explained the situation to EPA and assured them that we'd be holding this workshop to help permittees complete their LPCPs. And we stated that the MS4 permittees, so all of you, would report on the status of their your LPCPs in your year 4 or year 6 annual reports, which will be next September. So we weren't able to finish it in year 5, and year 5 has ended, but we're going to submit the completed version in year 6. So with all that background information out of the way, we're now going to jump into the template itself. We have finished the template and it is up online. Second, I can show you where that's located. Deb, can you nod if you can see the website? Okay, perfect. So to find the template, you're going to want to go to the NHMS4 website as always, go down to, or scroll over to MCM and appendices, go all the way down to Appendix F. You're going to click that. It's going to bring up this page, and you're going to want to scroll all the way down here to the end of the page to the phosphorus TMDL requirements. And you're going to see this tabbed content. You want to click on the LPCP Year 5 requirements, and right at the top, you're going to see written Lake Phosphorus Control Plan template. So this is where the template that we're going to go over today is located. Below here, you're also going to see several resources that we'll be referencing during our presentation. They're here as well as linked within the LPCP instructions themselves, so you can get to them from either way. Another thing that we're going to be referencing is your permittee-specific resources. Those are going to be big in completing this. And these permittee-specific resources are also located on the NHMS4 website. If you go over to the permittee-specific resources, it's going to bring you to this page, and every permittee has their own permittee-specific resource page where there's customized resources that you can use. So today we're going to use Kingston as an example because a lot of work had been done on Country Pond, and it's what we're most familiar with. So you'll click on your permittee's name, and right at the top, you're going to see Appendix F, and you're going to see several spreadsheets underneath there. The first will be Appendix F, name of your impaired water body, LPCP scope calculations, and Appendix F, name of your impaired water body, LPC parcel priority ranking. So we will be referencing those today. So that's where they're located. We do link directly to the permittee specific resources page, but I just wanted to show it to you in case you've never seen it before. Another important note is that there are communities that have multiple phosphorus impaired water bodies. So for example, Kingston has Country Pond that's impaired for phosphorus, as well as Greenwood Pond and Half Moon Pond. So you're going to have to create an individual lake phosphorus control plan for each of these impaired water bodies. So Country Pond will need its own LPCP, Greenwood Pond will need its own LPCP, and Half Moon Pond will need its own LPCP. I just wanted to clarify that. Now we can look at the template itself. Again, the template is on the Appendix F page, all the way at the bottom, right here. This, if it comes up, there it goes. There we go. This is what the template looks like. We went over this in some detail during some previous NHLMV and Seacoast Coalition meetings, but a lot has changed, and this is the final version now. So like all of our templates, it has a title page where you put your water body name and then fill out your municipality. The format for this is very similar to everything else we make in the NH Stormwater or New Hampshire Stormwater Coalitions. It is important to note that anywhere you see yellow text, you're going to want to fill in information. Sometimes it might say hashtag municipality, and other times it might just be plain text that is highlighted in yellow. Just make sure if you see yellow, you're putting in information. And then we have our table of contents. And I wanted to point out in the table of contents that there are several attachments that we're going to ask you all to put with your LPCP, and we will reference them as we go through each of these requirements. But I wanted to let you know that there are a lot of attachments for this. Don't panic because we have resources for all of them, but we just want to make sure we're giving EPA everything that we have. And then again, there's that list of communities that are required to make LPCPs because they have phosphorus TMDLs. It's also important to note that any red text within the template is either instructions or important information. This is just to give you some background information and to make everything easier for all of you. And we'll go into that more. This red text can be deleted once you're done with your LPCP template, or it would really just be your finalized LPCP plan. It can just get deleted from there. But for now, it's just there to give you all instructions and additional information. Also throughout the LPCP, we're going to be using the terms non-structural stormwater control measures and structural stormwater control measures. These are the same things as BMPs, but we're just calling them stormwater control measures because that's how they're referred to in Appendix F. So we just wanted to make sure that we refer to them the same way within our template to make sure we're using the permit language. All right, so now to get into the meat of the template. The little introduction to this is basically just setting some standards. It talks about the purpose of the LPCP, and it also states that you as the municipality will fully implement this LPCP no later than 15 years after the permit effective date, which would be 2032. That would be when your LPCP has to be fully implemented. There are bits and pieces that we'll go over that are due at different times, but everything should be done by year 15. It's also important that you make your LPCP available, be it on a website or at a physical location. That just popped up. And then
Tom,
yep.
Sorry if I may interrupt, I apologize. We're having a fire drill here at DES, so I'm going to have to leave.
Okay.
And I will be back. So if somebody else could monitor the chat, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
Hope to be back soon. Sorry.
Always at the most inconvenient times. It's never like when things are quiet. So like I was saying, you need to make your Lake Phosphorus Control Plan or LPCP available to the members of the public. Hang on one second. I have to let my dog in the room or she's going to keep screaming. I apologize. 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Not a fire drill, just a dog. So again, making the LPCP available, and then also making sure that you give the public time to review and comment on your LPCP so that they know what's going on. Whatever form you'd like to do that in is perfectly fine, but we do ask that you put the comments that were received in this text area right here in yellow. Another thing is that the LPCP will update the municipality will update their LPCP as needed to support the achievement of the LPCP, including in year 10. Since in year 10, there is a requirement to do a complete update to the LPCP if you haven't. We're suggesting that everyone does annual updates like we do for other MS4 requirements, but if you choose not to do that, you can just do it in year 10 because it is a requirement to make sure it's fully updated with the most current information in year 10. And that's just some other additional information that we're going to go over. So before we get into the requirements themselves, I know we haven't really touched a lot on the template, but are there any questions thus far? I don't see anything in the chat, and I don't see any hands. All right. So moving into the first requirement, which is the legal analysis. So the legal analysis, which is right here, and then there's instructions underneath it, and the instructions state that this was a requirement that was due in year 2, but there had been no place to report or show your legal analysis until this written LPCP, which was due in year 5. So what you need to do is take your legal analysis and attach it to this template as attachment A. It's in the instructions as well, just so that way EPA has it. And in case you haven't done your legal analysis or you need a little background information, basically what you just needed to do was to look at your existing regulatory mechanisms, such as your bylaws and ordinances, to see what changes could be made to implement your community's LPCP. So that might be new laws, so that way you can reduce, I don't know, fertilizer requirements or something like that. Anything that could be done to help lower your phosphorus loading, basically, from your municipality. So this first part of the template right here talks about that you have developed your legal analysis. And then the second part down here is basically an update on if you've taken any steps to complete or implement your legal analysis changes that you've identified. So you'll use this first option if you have not made any changes to your municipal existing mechanisms, or if you have made changes and have been updating your regulations, you'll list them here. And we also added right here at the top in the instructions, a link to Manchester's LPCP legal analysis in case anyone can't find their legal analysis. We know there's been a lot of turnover since year 2 of the permit, or in case you didn't get a chance to do it and now you can do it now. And this legal analysis looks like this. It's on the MS4 website. You can follow it on the link. It gives you a good starting spot, and you can see what another community has done. So just a little background information in case you need it. And then we move on to the funding source assessment. So the funding source assessment was due in year 3. It's another one of those requirements that had not been submitted yet, but now they want you to submit it. And what you're going to do is take your funding source assessment and attach it as attachment B to your LPCP plan. If you have not completed your your funding source assessment, the requirements are very vague within the permit about what is actually required. So our suggestion is you just take the information from the cost and funding source assessment, which we'll get to later on, and just put some of that information in there. We did a more in-depth cost and funding source assessment later on, but this was a requirement for year 3. So if you need to keep it vague, that's perfectly fine. All right, any questions thus far about the legal analysis or the funding source assessment? Those were all things that were due in the past, but again, communities might not have had a chance to finish them. Any questions? All right, so now we're going to move into the defined LPCP scope area. So the LPCP scope area was due in year 4. It was something that we had to finish last year, but again, we are now reporting in on it. Sally Soul is going to go over this in a second, but I just wanted to show you, there's 2 options for what you can do for your LPCP area, and you just choose the language down here for whatever option you choose. So Sally, I'm going to throw it over to you to explain more about the 2 options.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Are you able to share the Kingston Country Pond Perfect? And maybe make it just a little bigger for my old eyes? Oh, thank you. Oh, that's great. So Thanks, Tom. And Jamie can weigh in on this presentation as well, but the MS4 permit asks you to do two things. It asks you to choose an area in which you plan to implement your MS4 activities. And then two, set some pollutant load reduction goals for tracking those implementation activities over time. So there's two area choices that you're offered in the MS4 permit. Each town that has a lake phosphorus control plan requirement has a spreadsheet that does these two area calculations for you so that you can kind of see the numbers, so that they, everything is quantified for you so that you can help pick which area you want to use for your LPCP area. So when you go on the website and you go to your town, you will see a link to this particular spreadsheet for your town. And Tom, remind me, what is this spreadsheet called? I think it's called LPCP area. Yeah, scope, LPCP, scope and calculations. Okay, great, thank you. So everyone who's got this requirement has one of these spreadsheets. This is all based off of the hotspot data that UNH developed, that you've seen and worked with and loved through the years. So this information should look pretty familiar. So the first option for implementation an LPCP area is the entire area within a town's jurisdiction that discharges to the phosphorus impaired water body. So that basically means the entire area that's in the watershed of the impaired water body. So if you're a town like Kingston and you have multiple impaired lakes or ponds, you're going to set 3 different areas for each one of those ponds. So LPCP area 1 is the entire area within the town's jurisdiction that discharges to the phosphorus impaired water body. So for that, what you do first is we calculate the baseline phosphorus load, P base, it's called. And then, sorry, I've got to get something off my screen here. And then you multiply that by the TMDL percent reduction number. So the 52% comes right out of the TMDL, and you'll see that number in Appendix F for Country Pond. And that gives you your pollutant reduction requirement in the mass per year. So that is 209.7 pounds of phosphorus that you need to remove from that area in order to achieve progress toward attaining your TMDL requirements. The second calculation that you see below is simply the difference. It's what EPA calls the phosphorus allowable load from that area. So basically it's the difference between your phosphorus base, your P base, and your phosphorus reduction requirement, your PER. So 403 minus 209 is 193 pounds. So that's basically, with some rounding there, that is the allowable load after implementation for LPCP area 1. So again, LPCP area 1 is the entire area within your town that discharges to the phosphorus impaired water body. So that's all parcels within the watershed of the phosphorus impaired water body, regardless of whether they're in your MS4 area or not.
So Sally, can I just jump in
Yes.
here? So this was the big, we went back and forth when we were working on Country Pond, we went back and forth over this. It was very confusing at the time until we had one kind of illuminating conversation, I would say, with Newton Tedder. Kind of prefacing all this, you might be asking yourself, well, where are they getting these numbers? All these numbers are in Appendix F. It's listed as the pollutant load export rates for the individual land uses. And that's all kind of embedded in the hotspot map. So we are following all the numbers and criteria outlined in Appendix F. When we sat down and we started to look at Country Pond, you'll notice 2 things, like the P base for the second area based on the MS4 is roughly half of what the area is for the what's draining the watershed area. We also had some other lakes that didn't have any drainage area within the urbanized area. And so our initial assumption was that, oh, we don't have to, we'll obviously choose that because for those areas, we don't have to do anything. And that was sort of the, where we were a little bit misled, because what Newt had told us is inherent in causing or contributing to the impairment is that it's within the watershed. So we kind of, this is guidance now. If you're going to pick an area, I would highly advise you to choose the drainage area, not use your urbanized area. For the one thing, urbanized area is kind of going away. It's one of those mysteries when we look at the latest census data that they're not assessing urbanized area anymore. So we're still waiting to hear how EPA is going to incorporate that into the MS4. If they're not assessing urbanized area, what is that going to mean moving forward? And I think the writing's kind of on the wall. It's like, it's more of a, I would say it's a legal argument. Choose the urbanized area if you want, but I don't really think that it's going to matter. You're still going to be required to do work within the drainage area. And if you look at this, if you're needing to reduce 52% of the phosphorus, you want the bigger piece of the pie anyway. That allows you to go after more manageable load. If you're going to isolate yourself within already isolated area, then you're just going to limit the amount of things you can do and the amount of ways that you can demonstrate load reduction. So that's my 2 cents on that. I really feel like the urbanized area option here is a false choice, but that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jamie, and thanks for putting the frosting on that and for adding that the way we calculate the base loads is consistent with what's required in the MS4 permit. And I completely agree that, the LPCP area too means that you're just calculating these reductions and your allowable load based off a smaller area. But as Jamie says, that kind of limits your available implementation. And I don't know, it just seems better to go with the bigger area, have more options for implementation, and to start documenting greater load reductions in that broader area, especially since, as Jamie mentioned, as we look forward to the next iteration of the permit, it's possible that things are going to change. So, that's, I think, kind of how we feel about that. And I appreciate, Jamie, you're adding to that, because I was just being very linear. It's a Monday morning, but I think that's pretty much it. So this spreadsheet is available on the MS4 blog to help you sort of figure out for your municipality what you want your area to be. So you can go and you can look at the spreadsheet, and then, Tom, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see all the different parcels in the town, and you can tell which area these parcels would be located in, and that can help you drive implementation. I believe that Tom or Jamie, I think, is going to talk next about how to use the parcel information to prioritize implementation activities for your LPCP area. So we have taken that step as well. So we've built a tool that will help you figure out, given your LPCP area, where you can do structural stormwater control measures. And then Jamie will also talk about non-structural, but I think this is a pretty nice set of tools that you all should be able to work with quite handily for these 2 requirements of the plan. For action item 3, define your scope LPCP area, and action number 4, calculate those baseline and allowable phosphorus loads. So with that, I think we can take questions. Jamie and me are open for questions on this.
Hi, good morning. Eric here from Amherst. I was just looking at our spreadsheet. Now, we are behind on this, admittedly, and that's why we're here. Thank you for your help this morning. But I noticed in our spreadsheet, we don't have the individual parcels listed out. Is this something that should have been pre-populated at some previous date, or is it something at this point we're going to have to go in and select all the individual parcels?
Let me look, Eric. Hang on 1 second. Did a lot of updating on this yesterday, so it's quite possible that something might have gone funky.
Tom, this is Joe from Amherst also, and in terms of the areas to choose, we only have the entire area. We don't have any drainage area. We don't have the urbanized area option. Yeah,
Oh, this is for Babusick Lake, correct?
yes,
All right, does it look like this for you guys?
no,
Okay, that could be on our end, because I did just update this yesterday. Hang on. Let me just make a note of that. We do have those, Joe and Eric, so we can definitely get those to you. I'll do a refresh on the website, or you might try refreshing your like cache on whatever browser you're using, because I know when the website updates go through, sometimes it gets stuck. So if we both try that, that should be good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, the totals do show up in the menu. It just doesn't list the specific individual properties.
All right, hang on. That makes more sense.
and Tom, the LPCP area 2, we don't have that information either. Which I know was recommended not to use that one, but
Yeah.
it's not even an option.
Yep. Let me I'll touch base with you both. How does that sound? And we can
Great, thank you.
So
Thanks.
Tom, if this is the, if this is the updated worksheet, then it looks like it covers everything. You have the parcel ID and you have the street address, and then you have both area options.
Yeah, I think it's just stuck. All right, I'll put. All right, I will send them both to you afterwards, and then I'll make sure that the website part gets updated too.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
And then in just another emphasis on, we're looking at this as year 6 deliverable now. And as Tom mentioned in the beginning, and thanks, Tom, for working all weekend. You were sending this out. We've been kind of furiously trying to pull this together. It is a lot of information. And like I said, if you were to individually get this done, it would lack some of the consistency that we're adding here, and it would be a heavy lift for everybody. So this I guess we're all we're asking everyone for patience. We're asking EPA for patience because we want to get this right and we want it to be consistent. And, we're all sort of kind of sharpening our pencils to try to get it right as well. So this is a year 6 deliverable. And as Tom mentioned, there's language within the reporting templates that emphasize that, basically admitting that we're a little behind, but that we feel this is important and we want to get it right. We want people to get caught up, but we don't just want it to be, checking a box. We want it to be meaningful and helpful.
Agreed, Jamie. No, very well said. Any other questions about this? All right, so just to summarize this information, so like Sally said, you have option 1 and option 2, and this information, all these, the P-base, PRR, and P-allo are going to go, well, first for the define LPCP scope, you're going to choose one of the options. Again, the first one is to implement the LPCP area in the entire area, which is the one that we are suggesting. We feel that that limits you less on your municipal parcels that you can do. Or the second option, if you're just doing your MS4 regulated area. For the calculations that Sally mentioned, that is the next requirement, which is to calculate the baseline phosphorus load, phosphorus reduction, and allowable phosphorus load, which is P-base, PRR, and P-allo. We do have a link to the permittee specific page telling you where to find this information. And then once you find that, you're just going to put it right in here. So again, this was a year 4 requirement, but you want to make sure that you're putting your calculations in here so EPA says it, and you just steal those directly from your spreadsheet. All right, now we're moving into the newer things that we developed for this year. And this is where there's going to be a lot of discussion, and we're hoping to hear from all of you. So the next requirement is the description of the planned non-structural stormwater controls. As Jamie mentioned, everything we're doing is based off of what's in the MS4 permit, more specifically in Appendix F. All the non-structural controls come from attachment 2 of Appendix F, and we'll get to some more of those little caveats in a second. Jamie's about to go through a spreadsheet that we do have linked right here that has all of the calculations he's about to show, and you're going to want to update that spreadsheet. and with all the calculated information and attach it as attachment C to this document. So once you update your spreadsheet, make sure you save it and attach it to this spreadsheet. And then once Jamie goes through everything, I'll go through the template itself and show you where to put all this information.
Hey, Tom, before we go into the non-structural stuff, can you go back to either Country Pond or Amherst? It doesn't really matter to me. That spreadsheet, yeah, just scroll down so we can look at the parcels. So on the structural side, and it's possible we were getting here, all the baseline information is developed based on the existing land use conditions. That PLO is kind of the background. And we're really trying to target the manageable phosphorus load. And when we talk about manageable phosphorus load, we kind of we zero in on impervious cover, because what impervious cover represents is the most amendable part of that load scenario. We're not talking about going into you'll see on some of these areas that conservation land has a phosphorus export. A forest has a phosphorus export. That's all part of the PLO. Nobody's asking you to manage the forest. What we're really focusing in on is the impervious cover and using non-structural strategies to supplement structural strategies that will be based on specific parcels. And so what we've done here and what you're seeing is we've ranked the parcels in numerous ways. First of which, you'll see a town-owned flag. So town-owned lands have been marked. This is based on the best available information. And just like the Appendix H stuff, the nitrogen and phosphorus source identification reports, it requires some assessment. So, this is just based on what's available, and it's only as good as the information that's available. What we've done here is use different ranking criteria in order to organize the parcels in a way that you can put them on an implementation plan. So first is town-owned land. So we obviously prioritize town-owned lands because it's very easy for you to retrofit those opportunities. We also have conservation lands. We've selected out conservation lands because we obviously don't want to focus on those areas. And then we also have an MS4 flag there. So, some of these parcels are within your MS4 area or your urbanized area, and some of them are outside. So you can, depending on which scenario you choose, you can organize these so that you're only looking at properties that within your urbanized area or all of the properties. And we've kind of explained that already. And then, and that's what the watershed area flag is. So you'll be able to sort these properties and organize this data in a simple Excel spreadsheet by just filtering some of these in or out. What we left as a default is town-owned properties, filtered out conservation land. So you're not going to see any ones. A one would represent a conservation land. And then we were doing it by the, I guess initially by the watershed area. What you'll have to do is you'll have to, assess each one of these properties and the feasibility for some type of structural control. So I don't know where these are. For the most part, we almost contemplated just choosing the fire station, the schools, the town hall, the DPW yard, because the police station, right? Because that's what keeps coming up as all the manageable loads. So you'll have to assess what these properties are and whether there's an opportunity for retrofitability. So I haven't seen many properties that don't have opportunities to improve stormwater, but let's say you just updated your school and you included improved kind of state-of-the-art stormwater management. Well, that's obviously going to come off your list because the feasibility of retrofitting that is now infeasible because you've already done it. So, now you can start to count that as one of your activities. So put that on your plus scorecard. So if you scroll a little bit over to columns I and J, yeah. So this information really gets us into that financial feasibility. And again, this is sort of based on the best available data that we have. It's not 100% accurate, but it is consistently done in a manner that you can calibrate, I guess, based on your information. So we've used Appendix F load reductions based on the structural controls, and we've looked at a number of scenarios, or two scenarios really, treating 1/10 of an inch of rain on that property or 1/4 of an inch of rain. And the reason why we went with the 1/4 is that tends to be the knee of the curve. That's like the optimal strategy. So if you wanted to maximize load reductions on that particular parcel, you would be really targeting a design storage volume or physical storage capacity of about 0.4. So you know, in a retrofit scenario, nobody's asking you to manage the 1-inch water quality volume. They're asking you to kind of take an existing condition and make it better. And so that's why we provided these two options. The 0.1 inch would be the minimum. The 0.4 inch would be the optimal. Once you get beyond 0.4, it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just becomes economically, let's say the marginal gains are not worth, you know, increasingly are not worth the marginal costs. So we've added that. So you can see the actual load from the parcel. You see the load that could be reduced, and we just modeled a simple kind of infiltration basin or infiltration-based BMP at 0.1 inch of runoff from the impervious cover and 0.4 inches of runoff from the impervious cover. You choose what you want to do, but this is stuff that goes into your implementation plan. And then we have estimated costs. Those estimated costs in column N, thank you, again, are based on kind of the simple assessments that have been developed under the EPA, the EPA tools that have been developed for these scenarios. We've been told, and you know, like a DOT will tell us, your costs stink. And I completely agree. For a DOT, these are low level costs. What DOT needs to do, because most of their implementation is going to happen in a highway setting, they're going to need a police detail. They're going to need a traffic detail. They're going to need, you know, all the associated permits. They're not going to get away with anything. And so what we tell DOT is take this base course and add a multiplier. If that multiplier is 2, great. If it's 10, which is probably more likely, then that's how you begin to calibrate these costs based on your potential costs. So this is a starting point. And as you implement these BMPs and you say, wow, these were off by a factor of 2. Now you add a factor of 2 to the future costs. So it becomes part of a kind of an adaptive projection. So that's how we're really advising you deal with the structural controls. Create a list for the obviously for Appendix F, because you have a TMDL, it's a much higher bar. So you're looking to, you know, you're looking in 15 years to get as close as you can to that reduction requirement. So you're going to likely have to treat a larger percentage of your municipally owned lands. If you're under Appendix H for the nitrogen source identification report and the phosphorus source identification report, I think we do a kind of projection and an estimate of what you know, you should be managing. So if you manage the 10 of the top municipally owned parcels, then you're managing 91% of the available impervious cover. So those types of estimates should still be available to you if you need help gauging what you should be targeting. So if you're not under Appendix F and you're not under Appendix H, your really goal is to do at least one property. So that's kind of how the scale works. So thanks, Tom. I know that took a little bit of extra time, but I just wanted to be able to explain how you incorporate the structural controls into your plan. Any questions? All right. Going once, going twice.
I have one question. Sorry, Christine Bing here. I know a lot of this is focused under impervious cover, for sure, being a major contributor. But what about scenarios, especially in these pond areas? And I think of Kingston, working with Kingston, you know, flow restrictions and flooding that backs up to septic systems. I mean, how do you get credit for lowering the water table? Or, you know, if you have a bridge project going on and you're trying to get more flow to get an area, you know, dewatered or lower that pond level by a foot, you know what I mean? Or something different than these impervious cover tools. Are there other tools for estimating?
It's a great segue to the non-structural controls, and
Okay.
while some like flow augmentation could be a structural control, I think we'll cover it in the next section. The shortest answer is please be creative, and in no way do we anticipate. And one of the most exciting aspects of this is I hope, my hope of hopes is that we're not covering the universe of structural and non-structural controls that you can implement in order to get phosphorus reductions. Because if that was true, then it's kind of a gloomy picture, right? Because we know that there's things that you can do to get started, but we know there's all kinds of innovative ideas out there that are likely going to carry the day, because in many of these locations, when we look at just the structural controls, we don't see a smoking gun. We don't see a single property that's contributing the vast majority of the phosphorus. And if you retrofitted it, you would get half of your required phosphorus reductions. We just don't see that. So that's where we get into something a little bit more creative. The short answer to your question is, if we don't have credits that are existing, then we need to start to work on these things. And that then goes into the bin of future work products. And, you know, we're taking this seriously. The way we're looking at it now is you have enough kind of in the credit box, in the creditable section to get started. And when you're looking at implementation, pick off a couple of structural controls, right? Put that in your plan. Retrofit a couple of your municipally owned lands. That can only help, and it can demonstrate work towards this TMDL compliance. When you look at the non-structural controls, we'll talk about, you know, the top ones that, you know, we feel have credits now, and that you can, there's no real downside of maximizing the benefits of. But then you'll see this later list is the whole list of things that we really think are eventually going to get us across the finish line, but have no existing credits. So things that, like you're talking about, you know, septic system retrofits. We're working on those credits right now. Things like phosphorus inactivation. You know, that's a whole new territory. And it's not that you can't put that in your plan. An EPA allows you to put things in your plan. And if there are projections for those load estimates, reference those studies, reference those sources. And if that's something that you're really serious about, by all means, put it in your plan. What we're kind of talking about now, I guess, would be the low-hanging fruit, you know, the beginning of the journey. And that would be structural controls that have credits and non-structural controls that have credits.
And Jamie, when you say have credits, what you're meaning is that these are credits that are outlined in Appendix 4 of the MS4 permit. So those are the credits EPA already considers as legit. But as Jamie mentioned, we all know there's other stuff out there that we can quantify load reductions for, like septic system replacements or you know, shoreline buffers or things like that. But those credits don't currently exist in Appendix 4. So that's why Jamie's advising folks to be creative. If you have crediting schemes for other things, put them in there. Try, right, Jamie? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks. And it's sort of all hands on deck, though. Like we're gonna do what we can with these existing tools to demonstrate that we're working towards compliance. And that can only, you know, benefit you. So hopefully that answered it. Really is a non-answer, but there's really not a great answer for you other than I think EPA has demonstrated openness and flexibility with respect to compliance. And we know just from the data that we're going to need new tools in the toolbox for sure.
So with what Jamie just went over, we have this list here of this first category that are EPA approved or already authorized credits, which are catch basin cleaning, street sweeping, leaf litter management, turf grass fertilizer management, and impervious disconnection. And if you go into the template itself, in the non-structural section, you're going to scroll down. This first paragraph explains how we chose these non-structural controls, that they have EPA approved credits. And you're going to see this table down here with all of the potential non-structural non-structural stormwater controls, or BMPs, like I said, interchangeable information here. There are a few more details for each of these that you're going to want to pay attention to, but you can choose which ones you're implementing. A lot of these things might already be stuff that we're doing within our MS4 communities, but we might just have to take the extra step. Like the catch basin cleanings, for example, we're already doing that. The street sweeping program, you're doing that, but there's a few extra requirements there. I know a lot of us already have fertilizer, I guess, SOPs in place or processes that say, hey, we're not going to use fertilizers that contain phosphorus. Well, you can get credit for that. As long as you're using a fertilizer that has less than 0.67% phosphorus, that's considered a fertilizer containing no phosphorus. So these are additional things you can get credit for. And then, yep, so the leaf litter, all of that. And then also in the spreadsheet, Jamie was talking about those ones that, so they're BMPs or structural control measures that don't have EPA credits attached to it, but we're hoping to get that in the future. So that would be the shoreline buffer, for example. And if you scroll down within the template, you're going to see another instruction screen talking about putting in those non-EPA approved structural control measures. Same text explaining why we're putting them in there, and then you could put the buffer, the shoreline buffer, in here. And then the last group. Yep, sorry, Jamie.
It's not a case where it's approved or not. It's just that they don't have established credits, right? So these types of things are known to reduce phosphorus, but there hasn't been consensus around an actual credit. Like, we haven't been able to develop consensus around what an outreach and education program does to reduce phosphorus, just because they're so varied and so diverse. However, if something holds promise and you really want to explore something, find those resources that are out there, propose a credit, and that's where you just have to get a little bit more creative.
Yep. Yeah, and for like the shoreline buffer, if you wanted to get credit in your LPCP plan for this, you would just have to submit data to EPA. And this is something that maybe we can look at within the stormwater coalitions too. If it's something we feel strongly about, we can pull that information together and submit it to EPA to make sure they approve of it. And the last category, so there's 3 categories. There's the EPA approved, there's the not EPA approved, but it has some sort of phosphorus reduction attached to it. And then there's this third category, which they're not EPA approved and they don't have a phosphorus reduction. But like Jamie was saying, we don't know how to quantify that, how, like, for your septic system replacements and stuff like that. But it is something that you are doing, and that EPA should see that you're putting the time and effort into. So you've got your pet waste education and outreach, your septic system education and outreach. If you're converting vehicles into electric, stuff like that, we have put another section down here that you can pick and choose what you want to do. There is no pressure. If you don't want to use these EPA approved ones, it's completely up to you, but we wanted to give you the options, because if you're doing it, you should be getting credit, or at least make EPA aware of everything that you're doing. Oh, and then the big thing, Jamie, can you go over the calculators? I just realized that was also in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, so for non-structural,
Yes, yep.
yeah, for non-structural, a lot of these there are what we've added to that spreadsheet are the sources where we're getting the credits from. And for the most part, catch basin cleaning, those credits are outlined in Appendix F, and we're adopting an attachment 2 of Appendix F. We're adopting those. For the street sweeping credits, we have a new technical memo out on load reductions, phosphorus and nitrogen from sweeping activities. And we've referenced that in that spreadsheet. We have a technical memo that you can read that tells you exactly how to calculate it. We don't have anything currently as slick as the structural control calculator. It's just that's a lot easier. There's a lot more information needed on the non-structural side. So what I provided in that spreadsheet is how to calculate basically can you go back to the non-structural control spreadsheet? Yeah, there we go. So I've outlined in column C, column B is the method, and that method references exactly where you need to go to get get the method, and column C outlines what type of units you need. So again, catch basin cleaning, pretty easy. You need the number of catch basins cleaned or the drainage area associated with the catch basins cleaned. And we're following what's outlined in Appendix F to calculate that. So we're using those standard pollutant load export rates and the standard reductions associated with that BMP. For street sweeping, it's gotten a little bit more innovative. We now have an updated model credit and an updated measured credit. So if you pick it up and you can estimate the volume, you can get credit for the load reduction for fall seasons and non-fall seasons. So unfortunately, we don't have a slick calculator that you can just plug the numbers in, but all the references are really outlined here.
Jamie, could they use, I was looking at these, could they use these catch basin?
So these are estimates we probably developed for Country Pond. For the catch basin, yeah, if you can identify the drainage area and the impervious acres associated with the drainage area that your catch basin network drains, then you can use this approach. You just use like a median density load export, and then you get a phosphorus reduction for cleaning catch basins out, meeting that no more than 50% full, you get 2% load reduction. Or the other way you do it is you count the number of catch basins you cleaned in a given year, and then we assume a drainage area of about 4,000 square feet. So, you know, we use like an associated drainage area with the number of catch basins to get that load. Then that's how we generate the load, and then you take 2%. So either way, the catch basin cleaning isn't going to like hit your plan out of the park. But again, if you're doing it already, you should be getting credit for it. The sweeping is really the more innovative. And then, you know, in Country Pond anyway, you know, what we tried to do is we did enhanced sweeping around the 200-meter perimeter of the actual lake. So we recommended that. And I think we'll put a link to that report just to show you some of the creative thinking. You know, we also were thinking about instituting buffer control. So, you know, enhanced buffer, like maintaining a no-mow buffer, 100-foot no-mow buffer. How practical is that? You know, obviously that's going to take some administration, but, you know, we can calculate how many, I guess, linear miles of buffer we could generate from the existing condition to a future condition where we assume a 25 to 100-foot no-mow buffer. And we can use some of those existing credits that are outlined in the buffer credit work that was done in order to assign a pollutant load reduction to that.
Awesome. So this is probably, I feel like this is the area that might require the most thought and work into. Like Jamie said, if you, we'll put out some more instructions on how to use the calculations or how to do the calculations. We just weren't able to finish that in time, but there are resources available. We'll go through these calculators to make sure that they are good, like you said, Jamie, if they can be used. So yes, so make sure you're going through and choosing whatever non-structural mechanism, stormwater control measures.
And I would just say the key here is like not to get too distracted by the load reduction. You know, that's a best estimate, right? But really think feasibly about what it is that you could implement and really put that on paper, because we can always do, and Sally's really good at this. I'm getting really good at this of just doing a lot of kind of calculations with the existing resources to do an estimate. So let's say you have, you know, you worked on this plan and you know that you want to do shoreline buffering. You know that you want to do enhanced sweeping and you want to do catch basin cleaning, but you can't, you're having trouble estimating the load reduction. If you can come up with those units and your best guess at those units, it's really easy for us to get you across the finish line with an acceptable load reduction. So I guess we'll leave it at that.
All right, any questions related to that? A lot of options in this section, so just do what you feel comfortable or what you're already doing or what you could implement.
And I hope I'm not beating a dead horse, but what I think the key for this plan is to demonstrate that you're you know, trying to do a little bit of everything. So you're going to retrofit a number of your parcels that you can identify with structural controls, that you're going to implement as much of the non-structural stuff as you can do. And then you're thinking about, you know, some of the creative stuff like flow controls or, you know, septic pump outs, and a range of other things that likely are going to be necessary to get you across the finish line. But this is a starting point.
And this is a living, breathing document, like everything we do. So this will change. You will update it as you're like, oh, I couldn't implement this, or I did implement this. This was way easier than I thought, or something like that. So it'll be something that's updated, like I mentioned before.
Yeah, we just updated the non-structural control summary table for this process since we did it in Country Pond like 2 or 3 years ago, and there's already been advances and, you know, what the credits allowable. So this stuff is exciting and it's changing.
Awesome. And we'll keep you guys appraised, like Jamie said, as things change and we learn new things. This will be something that we update you on yearly. So the next section is the planned structural controls. Jamie already started to hint at this, and then we'll go over it in detail. And if you go to your permittee specific page, I'm going to go back to Kingston because that was the one that we were using. Jamie was talking about those parcel priority, or those parcels that fall within the MS4 area or within the watershed, depending on what version of the LPCP scope area you choose. And if you go into your water body LPC priority parcel priority ranking, we've done this for you to try to make it easier. So what we did was this first option is the LPCP municipal boundary. So this would be option 1 for your LPCP scope if you're choosing the whole drainage area, the whole watershed of this water body. Or the second option is just the MS4 boundaries, if it's only the watershed that falls within your MS4 boundaries. So that is on the MS4 website. You're going to want to complete this spreadsheet with all the information. Let me pull back up that spreadsheet. Complete the spreadsheet and then attach it as attachment D to your LPCP plan. And Jamie, I'll throw that back over to you to talk more about the specifics of it, but that spreadsheet does exist for when people need it.
Yeah, sorry, I jumped the gun on that. I always think in my head structural and then non-structural, like in a sequence, but
it's a weird order. It really is.
So I think we kind of covered it. I mean, we covered how those numbers are being generated, kind of some of the choices, and what Tom is, I guess, referencing is DES has already developed these spreadsheets that rank, your top properties by impervious cover. So here in Kingston, if we're looking at the whole drainage area, we're focusing in on only a handful of properties here that are actually available to be retrofitted. So in this particular instance, you'd be looking at Mill Road in Kingston and then Wiley Fox Road in Kingston. So 0.22 acres of impervious cover and 0.07. I don't think we generated costs for anything else because they just, it's really not that economically feasible. So, and I don't know how this is populated. Was this populated using the 0.1 inch?
Yes, we did the low hanging fruit
Okay.
in terms of cost. Yep.
So yeah, if that's something where you wanted to update this and you wanted to do more area, you could use the 0.4 from that other spreadsheet and just manually input it. But
And a question here, Christine Binger. So just like from practicality, you're saying the entire, like, if we can infiltrate whatever comes off that road, if we can infiltrate into a basin or vegetated swale, then we could get the credits. I mean, is that the BMP? The structural BMP is when you're talking about a roadway like that, you're just talking about taking that storage and putting it underground and not letting it run off.
right, yeah, we modeled a infiltration style system. So, I would say if it was a swale, you'd want to modify the swale to have a stone reservoir underneath so that you could capture and infiltrate that water.
Okay, thank you.
And then also looking at the spreadsheet, what we did was we had to do the inventory and priority ranking of municipal properties in 2.3.6.E within the permit. Surprised I remembered that. And what we did was we took all of these feasibility questions and we put them in here. So you can go through for each of these parcels that have some sort of phosphorus loading potential. You can answer these questions, some of which you might have already done if there's overlap between your inventory and priority ranking of municipal parcels from MCM number 5, and then you'll get a score here. And you can filter this score from highest to lowest. And then what you're going to want to do is, this just talks about how we did all of what we did, and that you're making a plan, and you're going to fill out this table. So you'll put your priority rank, which you'll get directly from this spreadsheet. So you'll have 1 through whatever your number is. You'll put the BMP that you intend to install in there, the address where you intend to install it, which is also from this spreadsheet, the expected phosphorus reduction, which is also from the spreadsheet, and any additional notes you have. And you do have a wide range of BMPs available to you. The list is up here in the instructions. They do list specific ones in attachment 3, and it probably covers almost everything that you would be doing. If you have a question, you're like, hey, where does this fall? Feel free to reach out to Sally, Jamie, Deb, or I. We can try to figure that out. I'm not the most expert on BMPs, but we can definitely get that information for you. So read the instructions, see what's available, what they say that you should install, what your options are, and fill out this chart accordingly. Any questions on this? This one's a little more straightforward. It takes a little bit more thought. I'm like, hey, what could I do? And obviously nothing is set in stone. So if you say you're going to put in I'm just going to use Rain Garden for an example at Old Mill Road or whatever, it might change. And we've made note of that in there as well, that nothing is set in stone and things will be updated as time goes on.
Yeah, and this is one of the things we differentiate as you move into implementation. This component of the process becomes less and less important, right? Like this is just fantasy land. You're trying to kind of project the most that you can do and project the largest load reduction. But as you implement and as you get into implementation, everything's going to then shift to, once you have a system installed, then it's really hardwired the credits that you're going to get. So you can be flexible here, and you can, be back of the envelope. A lot of these resources exist. I'll put in the chat. We have a BMP calculator that we develop using all the machinery and the accounting machinery in Appendix F. You can use Appendix F with a pencil and a ruler, and just look at the feasible area that you can manage through those range of 10 different structural BMPs, or you can use the estimates that we provided that essentially assume 0.1 or 0.4 inches of rain from impervious cover into your infiltration style system.
Any additional questions on that? Right, moving on. We're flying through it. Thank you for bearing with us. This is a lot of information. We hope it's making sense, but we also understand that you're going to need to dive into this. So feel free to email us questions later on.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, and that list looks intimidating, like, oh, there's so many factors. But for Kingston, you have 2 sites, and that, the feasibility is going to be, okay, the one is we can definitely do something there, and 2, we'll try to do something there as well, right? In some areas, you're going to have much more options, and that ranking order is going to be more important. Like, is it highly sloped? Well, that reduces the feasibility. Are there existing structures on site? Is there high areas of high groundwater? That could reduce the feasibility. So, in some areas, that list is going to be really, really important. In other areas where you'll only have 2 properties, you're going to do what you can in those 2 properties.
Yeah, and we do apologize, and it's just the kind of how the watershed went down. Sometimes you're going to have 10 to 15 parcels that you can work with. Sometimes you're going to have 2. So just make sure you look to see what you have. So the next requirement is another requirement that's new to year 5, and it's the description of the operation and maintenance section. Jamie's going to go over this in a second, but I wanted to show some additional resources. We're going to talk about inspection forms, and all inspections that you do on your stormwater control measures, you're going to want to attach as attachment E to this LPCP plan. And we do have several inspection forms already created. If you click these links, they're going to bring you to the first one. It's going to be the MCM number 5 page. And right down here at the bottom, there's going to be a list of all of these really nice BMP inspection forms that UNH made. So look through there. And the other option is within our municipal MS4 operation and maintenance program packet that VHB put together for, I'm pretty sure it was Dover. If you scroll down, you're going to see there's more of an inspection form here too. So you can choose which way you want to approach this. But Jamie, okay, I'm going to throw it over to you to talk about operation and maintenance.
Yeah, so operation and maintenance is a requirement here. And again, if you haven't fully implemented, there's not a lot to do. It's possible that you want to assess your existing, some of your existing BMPs, which I would recommend doing if that's part of your feasibility assessment, is you're looking at those properties that are identified as municipally owned land and they already have structural controls. I would recommend going through an inspection and maintenance protocol. And we have that on our website. I'll provide the link again in the chat. And we really, operation and maintenance is one of those things that we've kind of really evolved our thinking. When I first got into the business 2 decades ago, we were writing 30-page operation and maintenance plans, and we know exactly where they went. I think Bill Belanger calls those shelfies. That type of plan nobody reads. It goes on the shelf, and that's about the life expectancy of it. We then came up with these 1-pagers, right, that are a little bit more comprehensive, but they still talk about a range of different things that you may or may not be doing. And then we finally settled on a visual inspection, like a drive-by inspection. And we've actually had success getting students and other people with a range of really aptitude at assessing the integrity of these systems to come back with good information that we can use and we can update our asset management system with and develop maintenance orders with. And this is really four fundamental questions. Does it look like water can get in? Does it look like water can get out? Are there any obstructions to stormwater, or does it look like vegetation struggling? It's all based on visual indicators. So I'd say, depending on where you are in your process, one of these strategies hopefully will hit a sweet spot and can be incorporated in your systems. If you're developing a plan for implementation, then you're going to want to steal, some of those operation maintenance forms and link that to your anticipated inspection. And this is what we do if we're doing any type of retrofit or doing any type of implementation. It's required that we have an operation and maintenance strategy to go, or plan to go with it. And typically that one pager really suffices for that. I would say that that's probably good for now. And again, operation and maintenance really is a evolving topic. Right now, you get kind of credit in perpetuity for all these structures, but I really feel like when the next MS4 permit comes out, and as we advance, operation and maintenance is going to be a much more important component, and all the due diligence and kind of validation around the fact that you're doing this. That's where the current MS4 is hinting. When we hear people, EPA present on the future MS4, we think that they're going to hit the O&M pretty hard. The good news is we have a lot of resources to get you started on that, as Tom pointed out on the MS4 blog.
Thanks, Jamie. And like Jamie mentioned, you can keep this vague. You don't know how you're going to approach this, but they do want a schedule. So you can just put the address of the structural stormwater control, which you can find in the spreadsheet that we just looked at, the type of stormwater control potentially that you're going to install, and then an inspection and maintenance program. We suggested annually, biannually. That's going to change, but just get something on paper, and then who is responsible to do those inspections. I know we're running close on time, so I don't want to go too far over, but any questions about that? All right, well, feel free to speak up if you do have any. This next section is a new requirement as well for year 5, and it's the implementation section. Before we go into it, one of the implementation tasks is training. And to help facilitate that training, we did create an LPCP training log. And if you click that link, it's going to bring this up. This should look familiar if you have a chloride impairment or TMDL, because it's very similar to what we used. They basically ask that you keep track of what training you are doing. So this would be your LPCP personnel training log. Just record the name of the employee, the date of the training, the topics and materials covered, and the person who conducted the training. So I'm going to get into the schedule. Second. So this is the schedule. There were a list of tasks that everyone, or that EPA wanted completed, such as like implementation of all non-structural stormwater controls, which has to be done by the end of year 6. We kept it very vague. As you can see, locating and finalizing funding for structural stormwater measures is all 10 years. We kept it very vague because we wanted to make sure that we weren't locking anybody into something that they weren't ready for. Everyone's going to approach this LPCP at a different rate. Some communities might have more resources. Some might already be further along. So we kept this very vague. So that way, again, you weren't backed into a corner. Like the purchasing of construction materials, construction of stormwater control measures, it's very vague. Feel free to manipulate it if you want to, but we suggest you leave it this way because it does meet the requirements and does not commit you to anything that you don't have to do. There are some important things to note here. This just talks about the schedule we created. That this talks about updating the LPCP implementation schedule as needed as things change, including in year 10 when that update is due. Evaluating the annual effectiveness of the LPCP by tracking the phosphorus reductions achieved through implementation of the non-structural and structural stormwater controls. An annual review of the LPCP to determine if any changes need to be made and noting any that are made or aren't made. And then the annual training to employees. So the implementation schedule is pretty straightforward. Again, please feel free to take a look through it. I'm just going to move a little faster because we are running low on time because we're having great conversations and going over some really key things. Sally's going to cover the cost and funding source assessment. It's pretty straightforward in here, but I'll let her talk and then I'll show you what's within the template itself.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Sure. So you have to sort of develop a mechanism or describe a mechanism for how you are going to fund your LPCP implementation activities over time. And so to help with this, we've developed a list of potential funding sources that municipalities could apply to for funding to implement LPCP activities, both structural and non-structural. That list is contained right here in the template. The only caveat I would say is that, sometimes funding sources obviously change through time. So this is only like as good as today. So, you may need to check, over the years to make sure that some of these funding sources are still available. So as you can see, Tom is scrolling through a list of potential places where you can find funding to implement projects. These may or may not be known to you, but these are basically state and regional grant programs that offer funding for various activities that may be covered through your LPCP activities, So Clean Water SRF, the Charitable Foundation, Water Quality Planning Grants through NHDES, ARM, and then there's a space where you can add additional funding sources that you're aware of, or if you have municipal funding sources like your CIP, or if you happen to have a utility or a lake district or something like that, that could fund these activities, you would add them into the template there. But we started you off with some assistance by just listing out some potential sources that you might apply to for funding.
Sally, we have a question from Joe. He asked if there are any New Hampshire communities that are considering or using a stormwater utility to fund these types of projects.
Yeah, and there are. And Gretchen, can I call on you? Are you still with us to maybe just briefly describe Dover's utility journey?
Yes, I can. Well,
Thank
we're
you.
still in the journey, but we spent a ton of time, years. I mean, we started in 2020 on this last adventure looking into stormwater utility, and went through a whole just funding analysis, looking at different funding options. And then ultimately the ad hoc committee recommended a stormwater utility. So from there, since about March of this year, we have been really taking a deep dive into everything that's eligible, should be eligible under a stormwater utility. So everything that should be funded, and really kind of expanded our understanding of what is stormwater, right? And so we've really pulled out all of the treatment, treatment swales, all sorts of stuff out of what would be funded through the general fund or the highway budget, and really separated that into our stormwater utility fund. We have not adopted the utility yet. We're working with our ordinance committee right now to really finalize it. And we're looking to present to City Council in November and early December of this year for a vote. And if accepted, it would be implemented July 1 of next year. for that fiscal year. But yeah, it's going to cover all of these types of projects. So Dover doesn't actually have phosphorus, but we're doing a lot of the same stuff for nitrogen, and that's exactly what it's going to be for, you know, paying for stuff like that. Is that going to answer the question?
Yes, you did. And I was just wondering, it seems in New Hampshire, stormwater utilities, this is Joe, by the way,
Yeah, hi, Joe.
Amherst, doesn't seem to be a very popular funding mechanism. I'm just curious,
So
any
yeah,
comments on
The
why?
state, you know what the state motto is? That's
Yeah.
Wait,
yeah, right, Joe. I've
I mean
actually
to be glib, but
right, exactly. I've gone to a couple of things with Jamie and other in other states and stuff, and you're right. Live free or die, for death is not right, not the worst of all evils. So it's really not like let's collaborate and try and, you know, share funding. And so we are getting a lot of pushback, and it's funny because, you know, it in reality, this live free or die, you know, I'll only pay for what I do, low taxing, no income tax, stuff like this. The stormwater utility really feeds into that. But it takes a little while to get there. So one of our most fiscally conservative council members voted no to accept the recommendation to pursue the utility. And I certainly couldn't speak for him, but I think he's starting to come around, understanding that, and he still may vote no when it comes to the end of it, but there's this understanding that an individual property owner now has control over how much they're paying for stormwater management, rather than doing it based on an assessed value of your home, which is really the only other thing that we have. And there's really large amount of inequity, especially from the single family residential to the commercial properties. We're finding when funded just on assessed value, our stormwater is 55% funded through single family residents, but when funded based on impervious area, single family residential only accounts for about 27% of it, and the rest is the commercial, industrial, and also nonprofits, state roads, things like that start coming into the mix, which state roads aren't paying taxes, obviously, but they would be paying these fees. So I think that Dover would be the first in New Hampshire to do it. There's other, Portsmouth, Rochester are taking a look at the idea currently. Concord made some progress, but then really lost momentum through COVID. So we'll see how it goes, but I think this sort of lower government mentality has really made it so that New Hampshire hasn't pursued this. But my guess is as people start to understand it a little bit more, you're going to see that it really is actually more in keeping with this sort of hands-off, let me control my own fees way of doing things.
Right, thanks. And again, it's just, you know, I get the whole live free or die, but unfortunately, government is sticking their nose in, and, you know, it's something we all have to do. And, you know, at some point, if people just say, no, I'm not going to do it, I don't know, my experience in Massachusetts is the government will get their way. And, you know, why go down that road if you don't have to? And I don't know, it seems like a equitable way through a utility and impervious to, you know, fund these programs, because taxes just aren't going to cut it. And I don't know, it's just curious. It doesn't seem to be very acceptable, but you gave a good explanation as to the reason. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. One more little tip I'll say is Dover tried to do this. It's not like Dover tried to do it, but Dover really looked into it starting in 2009, and it you know, it did not go past 2011, but really only using the term stormwater utility. And this more recent time that we've looked at it, we've said stormwater and flood resilience. And, you know, that triggers, you know, ideas of like, or is it Wakefield or somewhere, you know, through these most recent storms and flood damage and, you know, things like that. So I think, sometimes it goes past just being sort of environmental tree hugging to like actual protecting infrastructure and safety. So that's one other kind of reframing that I think has helped.
Thanks, Gretchen. That's
Yes.
really good. And thank you for the good question, Joe, as well. So in terms of other things in the cost and funding source assessment, and I know we're going over at this point, but I'll make this very quick. You are going to want the estimated cost of implementing the LPCP, and that is why in your structural ranking spreadsheet, we put the estimated cost here. So if you decide to implement these structural BMPs or make them an option for something that you install a BMP on, you just want to add up the cost and put it right here. And then it just talks in this section about things that the municipality will do to secure funding. So doing research and apply to available grants, incorporating specific structural stormwater control measures to reduce phosphorus into its capital improvement plan, contacting local organizations such as Lake Association nonprofits to see if they want to collaborate, if there's any way you can help them. And then looking into the creation or the updating of municipal regulations, which could be a stormwater stormwater utility. That's the word I'm looking for. So that's just some stuff you need to fill out. And then the rest of this you can just leave in here, or you can remove if you are going to look into, or these are potentially optional assistance or grants that you could apply to, or funding sources. And then after that, you just go into your appendices. So that's the entire template itself. We want to, I just have one or two little reminders, and then we can throw it out to all of you if you have additional questions. Just want to remind everyone not to remove entire sections, because they're in there for a reason and they are requirements. So like removing the red text or choosing an option is good, but do not remove an entire section. Don't panic that you have to have everything implemented right away. Again, these LPCPs do not have to be fully implemented until year 15, which is 2032. There is that one requirement that is due in year 6 for the implementation of all non-structural stormwater control measures. We will definitely be touching base on this again within the coalitions to talk about this. So this will not be the last time you hear about it. And please take your time going through the template, because it is beefy. There's a lot of requirements. So take your time, look at it, get to know it. We already have that language in the annual report templates for year 5, saying that we will submit them in year 6. So you have time to complete this. Please don't panic and think that you have to finish it right away. And again, once you complete your LPCP, make sure the public has an opportunity to look at it and you have it somewhere, be it online or at a physical location where they can access it. And now we'll see if there's any additional questions, but this will not be your last chance to ask questions. You can 100% contact Sally, Jamie, Deborah, as you actually go through this template, because like I said, it's beefy, and I only gave it to you last night, and I apologize for that. Thought we could finish it faster than we could. There were some additions that need to be made, but it's in really good shape. So as you go through this, any questions you have, please reach out to us. We're here to learn the process too. This is something new we're doing. So if you see a way that would be better or there needs to be changes, please let us know, because we're here to help you and to help make a better product for everybody else. So I'm going to turn it over to the group for any additional questions that anyone has. All right. I think you all might be a little shell-shocked, because I think we threw a lot at you in an hour and a half, which is impressive that we made it through it in an hour and a half. But like I said, reach out to us if you have any additional questions. And Jamie just put a thank you, but I also want to thank everyone who worked on this, the chairs. So Jamie from UNH, Jean, Dawn, Gretchen, the chairs helped look at these things and help vet this to make sure it was good. Deb, you helped looked at it. Sally, Jamie, thank you guys for giving that information. This was a huge effort and probably one of the biggest templates we've ever made, but we did it, which is amazing. So we'll continue to add to it, and we'll make sure that it's being improved as time goes on and as these requirements move forward. All right, unless anyone has any other questions, I know we're 5 minutes over, so I'll release everybody to their Mondays. And again, feel free to reach out to us if you need help with anything else. Awesome. All right. Thank you, guys.